Why living alone can be better for your soul than any relationship. Solitude heals deep. What if the silence you avoid holds the very answers you've been seeking? In a world addicted to noise and constant validation, solitude is often mistaken for failure. But beneath the quiet lies something deeper, a doorway to self-respect, to clarity, to a version of you unshaped by performance. In this video, we'll explore why turning inward isn't an escape but a return. Rooted in the powerful insights of Carl Jung, you will discover how solitude can transform from discomfort into awakening. Whether you felt disconnected, overwhelmed, or simply curious about your inner world, stay with us. This isn't just another self-help lesson. It's an invitation to see your aloneness not as absence but as presence. The journey doesn't begin when someone saves you. It begins when you stop running from yourself. Let's begin that journey together. Awakening through solitude. There is a moment in life when silence stops being empty and starts becoming meaningful. At first, it feels like isolation, like something is missing. But in that absence lies a hidden presence, a presence that does not come from the outside world, but from deep within. Most of us are taught to fear solitude. We are told that being alone means we are broken, undesirable, forgotten. But solitude is not the same as abandonment. It is a space where the noise fades and something ancient within us begins to stir. Carl Jung believed that the journey to wholeness begins when we willingly step away from distractions, not to escape life, but to meet it more fully. When you are alone, you are no longer performing. You are no longer adjusting yourself to fit into the expectations of others. Instead, you begin to witness your own patterns, your pain, your truth. And this witnessing, though uncomfortable at first, is the beginning of something essential. We are not taught to trust this process. In fact, much of society views inner work as weakness or self-indulgence. But the truth is, nothing takes more strength than facing yourself in silence. No distractions, no validation, just presence. And in that presence, something shifts. You start to see that the emptiness you feared is actually a space of becoming, a space where healing begins not with answers, but with awareness. The more you stay with yourself in this stillness, the clearer things become. Not all at once and not with certainty, but with honesty. You begin to understand that solitude is not the absence of love. It is the birthplace of self-respect, of inner power, of genuine clarity. Awakening does not always arrive with light. Sometimes it begins in the dark, in the quiet, in the moment you choose not to run anymore. Why do we avoid silence? We often say we want peace, but what we really seek is comfort. Peace requires presence. Comfort only requires distraction. That is why silence is so difficult. In silence, there is no one to impress, no one to validate our feelings, no one to reassure us that we are okay. What remains is raw experience, and that can feel terrifying. From an early age, we are conditioned to escape inward discomfort. Crying must stop quickly. Anger must be hidden. Stillness is treated as laziness. Over time, we learn to fill every quiet moment with noise, with screens, with endless conversation. But what we are truly avoiding is not silence itself. We are avoiding what silence reveals. It exposes our unresolved pain, the memories we have buried, the parts of ourselves we do not want to feel. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious speaks through symbols and silence. When we avoid silence, we avoid our unconscious, and in doing so, we avoid truth. There is a kind of noise that looks productive but is purely protective. Busyness becomes a shield. Opinions become masks. The external world becomes a stage where we perform what we think is acceptable, but underneath the performance is fear. The fear that if we stop moving, we will fall apart. Yet the opposite is true. It is only when we stop that we start to see clearly. Silence does not destroy us. It introduces us. It says, look here, not out there. It invites us to feel, not analyze. And feeling is not weakness. It is the first step toward healing. When you avoid silence, you avoid yourself. When you learn to stay with it, even when it is uncomfortable, you begin to reclaim the parts of you that were silenced long ago. In that space, you stop performing and start listening. You stop hiding and begin to see. That is when change begins, descending inward, entering the transformation zone. Real transformation does not begin in comfort. It begins when the layers you have built around yourself start to crack. When you stop asking how to fix yourself and begin asking what you are protecting. This descent into the self is not linear. It is messy, unpredictable, and often painful. But it is necessary. Carl Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are by facing everything you are not. It is not about self-improvement. It is about self-revelation. In this stage, you stop adding more and begin peeling away. You question the beliefs you inherited, the roles you played to be accepted, and the expectations you never chose but live by. This is not a quick phase. It is a slow unraveling, an undoing of what was never truly you. You might feel lost. You might feel raw. But what you are feeling is the truth beneath the performance. The transformation zone is not a place of doing. It is a place of being. You learn to sit with uncertainty, to befriend discomfort, and to stop rushing toward answers. You start listening for the quiet signals, the subtle insights that only appear when you stop trying to control everything. This inner descent is not easy, but it is sacred. It demands honesty, not perfection, courage, not control, and most of all, patience, because the self does not emerge on command. It reveals itself slowly when the noise fades and the pretending ends. And in that space, you begin to feel something you may not have known before. Not excitement, not clarity, but a strange kind of peace, a stillness that says you are no longer running, you are arriving. When the darkness speaks, the moment you stop running from yourself is the moment the darkness begins to speak, not with words, but with memories, emotions, and sensations long buried. You may feel sadness with no story, fear with no name, anger with no clear reason. This is not regression. It is release. The shadow, as Carl Jung called it, holds everything you rejected, denied, or judged as unacceptable in yourself. It is the part of you that learned to hide in order to be loved, to adapt in order to survive. When you enter solitude, the distractions fade and the shadow rises. It is not trying to harm you. It is trying to be seen. But most people run at this point. They return to noise, to routines, to shallow connection, because the shadow is uncomfortable. It challenges the story you tell yourself about who you are. But if you choose to stay, to witness what arises without judgment, something changes. You begin to integrate the parts of yourself that have lived in exile. You begin to see that what you feared was not darkness, but depth. The more you face it, the less power it holds. The shadow is not the enemy. It is the doorway. And through that doorway is wholeness. Not perfection, but completeness. A life where you no longer have to split yourself to be accepted. Where you can carry light and dark without shame. When the darkness speaks, listen. It does not lie. It reveals, and in its honesty, you remember who you were before you forgot. Between solitude and isolation, healing or hurt, there is a fine line between solitude and isolation. From the outside, they may look the same. Both are quiet, both are alone, but their roots are different, and so are their effects. Solitude is chosen. It is a conscious return to the self, a space to breathe and listen. Isolation is not chosen. It is often the result of pain, rejection, or disconnection. One empowers. The other drains. Solitude heals because it allows space. It opens a door to reflection, self-trust, and clarity. Isolation, however, closes the world off. It builds walls out of fear and then reinforces the belief that no one will understand or stay. Many people live in a quiet form of isolation, even while surrounded by others. They seem independent, but beneath the surface is a history of disappointment, a fear of being hurt again. Carl Jung warned that a soul cut off from connection too long may collapse inward. Isolation turns defense into identity. And healing becomes harder because the heart no longer knows how to risk being open. The key is not to fear being alone, but to question why you are alone. Did you choose this space or did it form around you as a way to protect yourself? Is it peaceful or numb, honest or guarded? These questions matter because healing cannot happen in a cage. And growth does not bloom behind a wall. To step out of isolation is not to run into noise, but to slowly, gently reconnect with life, with meaning, with yourself. Solitude welcomes the soul. Isolation hides it. And the journey begins when you know which one you are in. Dropping the armor, restoring body and mind. Solitude does not only affect the mind, it speaks to the body as well. Most people do not realize how much tension they carry until silence begins to soften it. Years of emotional guarding live in the shoulders, chest, and stomach. The body becomes a container for fear, shame, and unshed grief. When you choose to be alone with presence, not punishment, something shifts. The nervous system, long trained to anticipate rejection or conflict, begins to receive a new signal: safety. In this safety, the body starts to release. You may find yourself breathing deeper, sleeping more peacefully, feeling less urge to prove or defend. These are not just signs of calm, they are signs of alignment. Carl Jung emphasized that the unconscious is not just a mental space, it is also stored in the body. Every suppressed feeling, every unresolved story manifests physically. Chronic fatigue, muscle tightness, shallow breath, these are not random. They are the language of the body asking to be heard. Healing then is not a concept, it is a lived experience. When you stay with yourself in stillness, your body starts to trust again. It no longer has to brace for impact. It no longer has to fight to be accepted. Instead, it begins to rest. And in that rest-deep repair happens. This is why solitude can be so powerful. It creates a space where the body and mind can reunite, not in force but in gentleness, not in urgency but in rhythm. You remember that you are not a machine. You are a system of breath, energy, emotion. And when all parts of you are allowed to exist without judgment, you begin to feel whole again. Listening to the voice of intuition. Intuition is not loud. It does not demand attention. It does not argue or explain. That is why so many people miss it. In a world ruled by logic, speed, and external proof, intuition becomes the quiet guest no one notices. But it is always present, waiting for space to speak. Carl Jung considered intuition one of the four core functions of the psyche. It is the ability to perceive meaning without needing step-by-step reasoning. You simply know, even if you cannot explain why. Intuition speaks when the mind is not racing, when the body feels safe, when your inner world is not drowned by noise. That is why solitude is its natural home. In solitude, the external voices fade, and the internal signals grow stronger. You begin to feel a pull, a sense of direction that does not come from fear or pressure. It comes from alignment. The challenge is that intuition often goes against what is expected. It may suggest rest when the world demands action. It may call for change when others want stability. But intuition is not here to please others. It is here to guide you. Learning to trust it is not instant. It requires stillness, repetition, and courage. And the more you honor it, the clearer it becomes. You start recognizing patterns beneath the surface, sensing the truth before it is proven. This is not magic. It is coherence, a life lived from the inside out, where decisions are no longer reactions, but responses rooted in clarity. Listening to your intuition is not rejecting reason. It is expanding awareness. It is choosing to include a voice that has always known the way, even when your mind did not. Meeting the future version of yourself. When silence becomes familiar and your inner world starts to stabilize, something new begins to emerge. It is not a dream or a fantasy. It is a quiet image, a feeling, a sense of the person you are becoming. This is not about chasing an ideal or trying to become someone perfect. It is about recognizing a presence that already exists within you. Carl Jung described the self as the totality of your being, the unification of your conscious and unconscious parts. Your future self is a reflection of that wholeness already formed, waiting for space to be embodied. This image is not built from goals or external success. It comes from alignment. You begin to sense what fits and what does not, what feels honest and what feels forced. The future self does not rush. It does not compare. It simply invites. The invitation is to listen more deeply, to act with integrity, to release what no longer resonates. As you spend more time in solitude, this version of you becomes clearer. You start to feel their calm in your breath, their strength in your spine, their clarity in your choices. This is not performance. It is becoming, and becoming is not about effort. It is about permission. When you stop being at war with yourself, the future self steps forward, not to replace you, but to join you, to guide you from within. You realize you do not have to wait to be whole. You are already on the path. And the more you trust that quiet guidance, the more natural it becomes to live in alignment. Not striving, just returning. Returning to what has always been yours. Awakening. Inner strength from reaction to presence. True strength is not loud. It does not need to prove itself. It does not dominate. It simply holds. And this kind of strength is born in silence. When you spend enough time with yourself without escaping or numbing, you begin to notice something shift. You stop reacting to everything around you. You no longer chase approval or fear rejection. Instead, you begin to respond. Response comes from presence, not from habit. It is grounded, steady, and conscious. Carl Jung believed that transformation is not about becoming better, but becoming more whole. And wholeness requires that we stop abandoning ourselves in order to fit in. This is how inner strength is built. Not in dramatic displays, but in quiet choices. The choice to breathe instead of explode. The choice to pause instead of run. The choice to speak your truth without attacking or shrinking. As you anchor deeper into yourself, your energy begins to stabilize. You no longer absorb every emotion from others. You no longer collapse under pressure. You start to trust your own rhythm. And with that trust comes resilience. Not the kind that hardens you, but the kind that opens you wider. This is not about control. It is about coherence, a state where your thoughts, emotions, and actions align, where you are no longer scattered or split inside. Strength is not found in perfection. It is found in presence, in the way you stay with yourself in discomfort, in challenge, in fear. And when presence becomes your foundation, the world no longer pulls you off center. You become the anchor. You become the calm, forming wholeness and stillness. Wholeness is not a goal to be reached. It is a state to be remembered. Beneath all the noise, effort, and striving, there is already a part of you that is whole. Not because it is perfect, but because it is true. Stillness gives that part room to emerge. In the quiet, you begin to see that healing is not always about doing more. Often, it is about doing less. It is about creating space for what has been buried to rise gently. Not to be forced, but to be witnessed. Carl Jung spoke of active imagination as a bridge between the conscious and unconscious. In that space, images, feelings, and inner symbols begin to speak. You are not inventing them. You are remembering them. Wholeness is a reunion with what you forgot you had, with the parts of you that were silenced to survive, with the voice inside that was once ignored. When you sit in stillness and meet yourself without judgment, something powerful happens. The self no longer hides. It begins to take shape. Not instantly, but gradually, like light returning after a long night. You may start to notice subtle shifts. You stop needing to prove your worth. You stop rushing to fix what is not broken. You become available to yourself. This is what presence means, being available. Not distracted, not defended, just here. The more you return to that space, the more natural it becomes to live from it. This is how wholeness forms, not in a dramatic transformation, but in quiet return. Again and again, until it is not a practice but a way of being, a way of living where you no longer need to become someone else. You simply remember who you already are. Coming home, a journey back to yourself. Coming home is not always about returning to a place. Sometimes it is about returning to a self you abandoned long ago. The self that was quiet, sensitive, uncertain but real. In a world that rewards performance and punishes pause, many of us learned to leave ourselves behind. We became versions that others wanted. We chased acceptance and called it love. We shaped our voices to match the crowd, but somewhere along the way, something went missing. And what was lost was not your value, but your connection to it. The journey back is not glamorous. It is slow and often invisible. There are no medals for sitting with your pain, no praise for unlearning patterns. But this journey is sacred. Each time you choose presence over distraction, honesty over performance, silence over noise, you are returning. You are coming home. Carl Jung believed that the most important encounters are the ones we have with ourselves. Not to criticize, not to fix, but to witness, to see what has always been there but was covered by fear, expectation, and survival. This homecoming is not a destination. It is a relationship, one that deepens every time you choose to stay when it is easier to run. Every time you choose compassion when judgment is louder. Every time you remember that you are enough, even in your uncertainty. Coming home does not mean you will never lose your way again. It means you now know the way back. You no longer need to search the world for a place to belong, because the belonging you were always looking for has been quietly waiting, not outside, but within, debunking societal misconceptions about psychology. Many people still believe that seeking psychological understanding means something is wrong with you, that needing therapy is a sign of weakness, that talking about your emotions is unnecessary or even shameful. These beliefs do not come from truth. They come from fear from generations taught to survive by suppressing rather than feeling. Society has praised the mask of strength and shamed the process of healing. But real strength is not about never needing help. It is about knowing when to ask for it. Carl Jung believed that the path to wholeness involves meeting the unconscious and integrating what was once hidden. This is not a breakdown. It is a breakthrough, and yet so many people hesitate to begin this journey because they fear being judged. We need to unlearn these fears. Understanding your mind is not a luxury. It is essential. Just as we care for our physical health, tending to our mental and emotional well-being is a form of respect. It is not a weakness to feel deeply. It is not indulgent to want peace. It is wise to want to understand your patterns, your pain, and your potential. Psychology is not about labeling. It is about liberating. It helps us move from reaction to reflection, from defense to presence. When we normalize this conversation, we begin to heal not just individually, but collectively. We create space for honesty, for nuance, for depth. You do not need to be broken to benefit from self-awareness. You only need to be human. And the more we speak openly about the inner world, the less power shame will have. Healing begins the moment we give ourselves permission to understand. Meaning in life awakening after the darkness. There comes a moment when healing alone is no longer enough. When you no longer want just to stop the pain, but to understand why you are here. This is the beginning of a deeper awakening. One that does not come from escaping suffering, but from walking through it with awareness. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, wrote that life is never made unbearable by circumstances, only by a lack of meaning. Meaning gives us a reason to endure, to rise, to continue. It does not erase pain, but it gives pain a place. It transforms wounds into wisdom. In solitude, once the noise fades and the shadows are met, this question starts to rise. What now? And the answer is not always loud. Sometimes it comes as a whisper, a feeling that your life is part of something larger, that your experiences, even the hardest ones, carry seeds of purpose. Finding meaning does not require a dramatic mission. It requires attention to what moves you, to what stays with you, to what you feel called to contribute. Meaning is not fixed. It evolves with you. It deepens as you live more honestly. And it expands when you share yourself without shrinking. Carl Jung believed that the soul longs for purpose, not comfort. That true peace comes when our inner truth meets outer expression. Your life does not need to be perfect to be meaningful. It needs to be yours, lived with presence, with courage, with care. Awakening after the darkness is not about being fearless. It is about being devoted. Devoted to living a life that feels true. That is where meaning begins. And that is where healing becomes becoming. You did not arrive somewhere new. You simply stopped running. The silence you once feared has become your anchor. The questions that haunted you now guide you, and the self you longed to become was never ahead of you. It was waiting behind everything you thought you had to be. This is not an ending. It is the quiet beginning of something deeply real.